Hello, I'm back. This is a review for American Fiction, a movie that I watched last week, I think. Came out this year and has received several Oscar nominations. You see, the Oscars, if you don't know, let me explain it to you, assuming you don't know what they are a really bad and stupid set of awards that are distributed based on whether or not a movie covers what is considered taboo by the Academy. Not even covers, just like includes something. Now, sometimes the movie does actually cover what the Academy considers taboo, and it's like a good movie. But other times, it's just like, oh, we mentioned a character from a minority having a problem with them, from racist people or whatever. It's like, oh, well, we better nominate that. The movie doesn't actually say anything about that, but we gotta nominate it. Luckily, American Fiction is not like that. I bring up the fact that it's been nominated for some awards because I've been going through a bunch of movies that been nominated for the 2024 Oscars and just seeing what the hype was about, I guess, even though I haven't heard of over half of them, including this one. I didn't hear about this movie at all until I looked it up and watched it, and I liked it. I liked it quite a bit, actually. It's not perfect. It has some issues, there's like a few noteworthy things about it, but like noteworthy bad things about it. But otherwise, it's a good movie. I liked it. So American Fiction is a movie about a writer by the name of Monk. That's not his actual name. His actual name is Thelonious Ellison, which is I love that name. Anyway, Monk, he's played by Jeffrey Wright, who I don't actually know what else he's been in. Oh, right. So he was Lieutenant Gordon in the new Batman movie. Seems to be work with Wes Anderson, and it's also in the Hunger Games, though I don't know as who, because I didn't really pay attention to those movies when they came out. I was quite young. Well, younger. I was like 12, I think. Okay, so this is a movie about a writer named Thelonious Ellison, who I'm trying to think of a way to succinctly put it, who basically scams the publishing industry by writing a purposely shitty, I guess, inner city drama. First called, what was it called? I think he called it My Predicament, or something like My Phantoms, or something with a PH, but he spelled it with an F because it's but later he just calls it Fuck. And it's basically it's a movie about a very specific racial issue in the in the world at large, I guess. Because Monk is black. And in his own words, he's the only person in the world who doesn't care. Or he effectively says, or some character effectively says that about him. It's about a very specific issue in not just the publishing industry, not just with black people, but just people of color as a whole, where POC artists are expected basically to incorporate ideas and themes of their own racial identity into all of their art. And I think that's a really interesting idea. And I'll talk about it more later. And they do some interesting stuff with it. It's a bit of a satire, this movie, but not a cartoonish satire like a Mel Gibson movie or Terry Pratchett. Mel Brooks. I'm sorry, fuck Mel Gibson. Mel Brooks. But it's not like a cartoony satire, but it is it's clearly satirical. Get my notes out. because I have notes this time. I'm not working off of a script because I've discovered that if I write a review for a movie, like fully write it out, that scratches the same itch in my brain as just recording it. So my mind, after, like, if I wrote the whole thing out, my mind would basically just go, well, I already have it, so, like, there's no point in recording it. And then, like, yeah, I just procrastinate recording it. So, like, this is a happy medium, having an outline and notes, I feel. So I guess there's not much more. I kind of guess I went over all the main ideas, like introduced them already. I guess I talk about the most interesting thing, which is the themes of this movie. Which, as I said before, it's about how, like, POC creatives are expected to incorporate ideas of their and like themes of their racial identity into their work. Now, I think this is interesting for a few reasons, because nowadays, whenever movies want to tackle things like racism, which is, like, such a broad and, like, complicated topic, they they try to talk about, like, the whole thing, you know? Like, they'll talk about, like, oh, we gotta talk about, like, every issue of, like, all the nuances of racism, and we gotta talk about how it affects all these people. We gotta talk about police brutality and, like, hiring, or what's it called, discrimination, like hiring discrimination. We gotta talk about, like, just general discrimination. We gotta talk about, like, stereotypes. It's just, like, there's, like, so much to talk about, and, like, so many films are like, yeah, we could talk about this, like, all of these aspects of, like, a really complicated concept, which is, like it's hard to do. The only movie I can think of in recent memory that has actually pulled it off, of, like, taking a broad topic and actually, like, successfully talking about it and exploring it, was Barbie, which is pretty good. I gave that an 8 out of 10. And it does actually a pretty good job exploring ideas of feminism and patriarchy, which are both really broad, but they do a good job, like, exploring these ideas, mostly by exploring individual concepts within these systems instead of just the broad whole, which, like, a lot of movies falter with. It kind of reminds me a bit like this trend in movies where it's just like, we're not going to talk about a specific, like, way this people group are discriminated. We're just going to talk about the concept of being discriminated against. It kind of reminds me of very shitty Netflix show called 13 Reasons Why, where it was a very infamous show because in season 1 it very, like, it's most well known for its first season, which romanticized suicide, basically. But what is less known, or I haven't heard as much discussion around the later seasons, but there's 3 more seasons after the season 1, and those seasons, I shit you not, were written like in the writer's room. They had a roulette wheel, and on, like, each, like space, they had a different social issue. Like they got, like, homosexuality, immigration, transgender stuff, feminism. Like, they had abortion, and then they just spun it, and then whatever it landed on, that was going to be the topic of this week's episode. Like, and that's how it was written. And because of that, like, it was very weird and cheap, because it kind of felt like they were just talking about controversial subjects just to get, like, clout, I guess, but not actually taking the time to explore them. And to be fair, if they took the time to explore them, that would have been hard to do, because it's hard to talk about something so broad. And that's not something American fiction does. Sorry for repeating myself a little bit, but I just find it interesting that they took this very specific concept of, like, racial discrimination in this very specific field, and they like it works because of that. It's very interesting. The idea I said before is not the only idea, this, like, racial idea discussed in this movie. They also talk a lot about, like, white guilt and how silly it is, about, like white guilt as in, like, oh, well, we, like, how, like, some white people are, like, feel obligated to, like like buy stories about like African American people, but they're only ever like, you know, inner city or like slave stories. They're never like any other type. And it's like, yeah, it's interesting. I dug it. I dug it a lot. Um, it, but it also doesn't like side against like the concept of telling those stories, which I also appreciate, because Monk basically is a very I love Monk. I thought he was very relatable, which might not be the best thing to feel because he is kind of an asshole in the movie. But he's a very like not liberal arts English major asshole, more like old school academic asshole, but not like the Holdovers. Like he's not like the professor. Like he's not Paul Giamatti's character in the Holdovers. It's more like I have a deep appreciation for art and nuance and subtext, and I am so disappointed that this modern generation just does not pay attention to that stuff. It's a bit like Boomer shaking his cane, but like for reasons that like you that aren't like wrong. Um, but to be fair, like ignoring subtext and like nuance, that's nothing new. People have done that for literally ever. But it doesn't mean it's not a problem though. Just because it's a very old problem doesn't mean it's no longer a problem. Very long problem. I meant like did I say a very long or an old problem? I don't even remember. Okay. So Monk is I'm sorry, I don't remember what I was talking about. I have ADHD, so what does that tweet say? My frontal lobe is a unicycle and the devil rides its pedals. Talking about Monk, I really like this character, and it's very interesting how the rest of the world, particularly in the publishing industry, interacts with him and treats him throughout the movie. And he has a very like firm stance against like stereotypical African American stories. Like he's basically like, oh, the only stories being made about African Americans are like stories about slavery or segregation or like gang violence or whatever. Like can't we just like write stories and like have them be read and have them not include racial themes? There's a good scene in the movie like I quite like, which was like satirical but also like something I have seen in real life, which is my favorite bit of satire, which is like, oh, this is ridiculous but also literally fucking happens, where basically he's feeling a little insecure that like he's not a popular author. So like in an act of pathetic insecurity, Monk goes to a random Barnes and Noble and he starts looking in the for copies of his books, for his books, and he looks in the mythology section because I don't know if they ever explicitly stated this, but I think it's implied that like the books he writes are like modern retellings of Greek plays and like Greek myths, I think. So he's looking in the mythology section and he's like visibly like anxious that he doesn't see his name anywhere. He's like, oh my gosh, people don't people don't read me anymore. And like a staffer, like someone who works there, walks by and he stops him and he goes, excuse me, do you have any books written by Thelonious Ellison? And the guy pulls out his iPad. It's just like, oh yeah, we have several copies. And the Monk is like, oh great, where are them? Where are they? I don't see them in the mythology section. And the employee goes, oh, they're not in the mythology section. Let me show you to the section where they're at. And he brings them to the African American issues or African American studies section. And Monk is just like flabbergasted. And like he says as much, like the employee doesn't know how to answer, but he basically just starts taking out his like anger on the employee, and he's just like very quiet anger, but a very much like, can you tell me what a modern retelling of Thucydides' the Peloponnesian War have to do with the African American experience? And the employee's like, I don't know. And Monk just goes, I don't know either. I don't know either. Is it because his author is black? Is that it? And the employee's like, I guess. And Monk's like, oh, great. Well, I guess that's all it takes for it to be considered a piece of, cover African American issues, as long as the author is black. And then he just grabs the books and just runs them over to the mythology section. It's a little funny, but like I have seen that before, where like I have like gone to like Barnes and Nobles, because I read a lot of fantasy books because I'm a nerd, and I've looked up like books by certain authors, and they're not in the fantasy section, and I'm like, what? Why the hell not? And I go looking around, and they're like in completely random sections. Sometimes they're like in like more like just like general novels section, which is like whatever. But then other times they are in like African American, like what's the proper term? I think it's just African American literature, which like I guess if your definition of African American literature is written by a black man or black woman or black envy, then like fine. But as like Thelonious like discusses in the movie, his issue with that is that you're basically reducing the work down to the racial identity of the author, and that's kind of fucked up and actually kind of racist, which I don't disagree with. I don't know if you've picked up on that, but I don't disagree with that. But one thing I really like about this movie is that they don't side with Thelonious completely. He says some things that are just like kind of wrong. Like he like pretty callously disregards any and all stories about like slavery or segregation or gang warfare as just like trash. And the movie, he has this like rival-ish, like rival adjacent character. I forget her name, but she basically writes like stories closer to that, and he very much hates her for it. He thinks she's like not like a book talk author, because they don't like, but like book, like very much like a clout chaser, like a there's a term for this, very much like flash fiction. Flash fiction is like when you write like it's a writing exercise. It's flash literature. It's like flash fashion, but like for literature. It's basically just writing sensational books, making a bunch of money, and then no one ever reads them after like 3 months, and then you don't care because you made a lot of money. And that's basically the perspective he builds up of her, and I'll talk about her a bit later. But the movie points out that like, though some of the stuff she says and believes are not like I personally disagree with, she does bring up some good points about like, hey, like these experiences are still real and legitimate. Like gang warfare and slavery and segregation are experiences real people have faced. And it's one I have a connection to because I am black. And like I know people personally who have like experienced stuff like that, or remember experience stuff like that, or have descendants who experience stuff like that. Or ancestors, sorry. So like it's kind of weird that you're like hand waving a completely legitimate human experience just because it's like over talked about, or like overrated, and like at least that's how she phrases it. And like I don't disagree with her, which is very interesting that like this is like the first movie I've seen in a long time where like the protagonist and what is like effectively the antagonist have points I agree with both on like some things, but disagree with them both on other things. And I'm like, wow, this movie's actually being smart. Good job. It's not always smart though. So the main criticism of this film, and the one you'll hear a lot if you've seen other reviews for this movie, or if you've seen like, I don't know, like if you've seen like Letterboxd reviews, is that like this movie has a short attention span. That is to say, they devote maybe 50% of the film's attention to Monk's family life. And this is a problem mostly because, not because his family life is boring, it's kind of like fine, but it's mostly a problem because it's not tied back into the main plot nearly as well as it could have been. I don't think it like they ever even like intersect that much beyond like one conversation he has with his girlfriend. Um like I think what they were kind of trying to go for is how his scam, which I guess I didn't go over his scam in too much detail, but like I'll talk about it in a bit. I'm talking about characters now. Talk about plot in a second. But like I think what they were trying to go for is like seeing how his scam kind of like added stress, like made him more stressful, and how that affected his family as a result. But like, why do we care as the audience? That is, why do we as the audience care how this book like is making him act towards his family? And like that one discussion he has with his girlfriend is pretty good and is like relevant, but like otherwise he's just like a bit snippier than usual. Or yeah, is that the word? Like you know, he snaps a bit more. You know, he's a bit more grumpy than usual, and like that's about it. I don't know why the movie thought it was important to show us that, but apparently it did. Um, I think this movie had potential to be like a 9 out of 10, maybe even a 10 if they cut the family stuff or like reduced it, or if they had to keep it in the movie for whatever reason. I think it would have been better if they like more succinctly tied it into the main plot. You know what? This is a weird example that just popped into my head, but you know what does this actually kind of well is fucking Castle. Castle is an old ABC police procedural. It's not that old. It's like a decade old, but like it's very much a comfort show for me because it's a pretty bad show. Most of the episodes, like the plots, are pretty stupid, but it's fun because the characters are likable and they have great dynamics. So it's really fun to see these like characters you love, investigate the dumbest murder mysteries like in New York, basically, and take them like super seriously. But a lot of plot lines focus, or subplots of a lot of episodes focus on Castle. That's the main character's last name. It's Richard Castle. He lives with his mom, or his mom lives with him, and he has a daughter. He's divorced, and those are like his two main family members. And there's a subplot in each episode, or most episodes, where either one or both of them is having an issue, which seems completely unrelated to the mystery at hand. But then one or two things will happen. Like it'll cut to these things throughout the episode. Like the daughter Alexis is just like, my boyfriend dumped me, or his mom Martha, who's like a washed up actress, is like, oh, I'm so stressed out about this latest audition, And at the end of the episode, they'll have like one final interaction where like, by conveying a strong emotion about how their experience in this episode and the subplot of this episode affected them, Castle realizes either something about the case, like it makes him rethink the murder mystery in a way he hadn't before, like look at it from a new perspective, and that leads him to solve it, or it helps him deal with a problem, like a personal issue he's been facing throughout the episode, or both. And those are really great. I kind of like that. It's very much like, it's cute. It's cute, and I like that. And like they don't devote a ton of attention to it. It's more like the scenes where his family shows up is very much treated like breaks or intervals between like very stressful situations. I say very stressful, but it's like a 2010s police procedural, so it's more like, oh, my drug dealer was actually my brother, and I'm sad he's dead. So it's like, okay, mediocre performances about like an issue we don't really care about, but okay. Anyway, but like, yeah, I like that. I liked the show for that. I think it's a very cute idea. And if American Fiction wanted to do something like that, where like the subplots of his family, like they were all having their own issues, and like through seeing what they were facing, Monk kind of realized something about his career and or himself, then like that could have been neat. And I think they tried to do that, but it didn't really like come across that way. And the fact that they devoted so much attention away from the main plot onto the family is such a shame because the main plot is so much fun. I was like having a blast whenever like he was dealing with like publishing, like the publishing industry. It was like really fun. There's a like my favorite scene in the movie because it's so creative. Is basically so like I said in the beginning, he's like after writing these like these mythology books for like his entire career, he kind of gets fed up that like all these other like not like Atlanta, but like a shitty version of Atlanta, that like TV show with Donald Glover. Donald Glover? Is it Grover or Glover? Troy Bolton. Troy Bolton. That's Troy Barnes, who's based off of Troy Bolton, but like yeah, Troy Barnes, from Community. Anyway, like Atlanta adjacent, but like a shitty version of Atlanta. He's like tired of these books being the only thing that are like popular, from artists like himself. That is to say, black people. So because he's so fed up, he purposely writes a unbelievably shitty gang warfare book. I forget the exact genre, what it's called, but like it's about like, you know, gangs in the inner city and stuff. That, yeah, like I said, he just eventually just titles as fuck, and he kind of poses as like this like gangster who's like on the run from the cops or something. Which, you know, all that the publishing industry really eats up. And there's a great scene, and I kind of wish they did more of those types of scenes later on in the movie, where at the end of Act 1 or around the end of Act 1 where he's writing the book, two of the characters that like he's writing shows up. One of them is played by Keith David for some reason, who I love. I love Keith David. He's one of my favorite actors. But he's there, which was a pleasant surprise. And they show up and they're doing this like interaction, you know, whatever. It's like playing out like they're playing out what Monk is writing in the book. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of fun. But then like Keith David character starts stuttering over his lines, and he turns to Monk like at his typewriter and goes, I don't think my character would say that. And the rest of the scene plays out like a theater director leading his actors through a scene. And it's like so interesting. It's such a fun way to depict the process of writing a first draft and like correcting and rewriting it and fixing plot holes and stuff. Like it's like really creative. And like I'm always like nervous about like praising a movie for something I think is unique, because like sometimes like I'll do that and then I find out like, oh, actually this other movie that came out years earlier already did it, and then I feel like an idiot. So if another movie did that, great, that's awesome. But I really liked it when this movie did that. I thought it was a lot of fun, and I kind of wish they did more of it later in the movie. That could have been a lot of fun. But like, yeah, it was definitely the best scene in that movie. It was I was cackling during it. Yeah, speaking of humor, this movie's not like, it's a satire. It's not laugh out loud funny, but it's like your friend sends you a meme at like 2 a.m. that makes you smile and exhale funny. Like it's funny, but you're not gonna like audibly laugh at it, which is not that's not a criticism. Like I think that there's a value in that type of humor, but like it's just something I'm bringing up. Anything else? I kind of moved on to plot instead of talking just about characters. Oops. Oop. Oh yeah. Every white character is not. I guess this is kind of a criticism. It's not. Well, not really. It's just something I think it was a little odd. Every white character in this movie is kind of portrayed as like babbling idiot, ridden with white guilt, except for like the director character, who's kind of like portrayed as just a money grubbing leech. Which, to be fair, yeah. But like, I don't know. I think like in a different movie, in a movie that was less smart, that would make me feel like, oh, that's lazy. But in this movie, it and I think it's because the scope of like the issue at hand, which is specifically racism in the publishing industry, because that scope is so much smaller, than like other movies, like it kind of makes sense, because to me it kind of read as like they're not making a claim about white people as a whole. They're making a claim about like usual or expected behaviors in this specific context from often white individuals. Like maybe I was reading into things, maybe I'm giving the movie too much credit, but that's how it felt to me. Like I'll see like shitty movies that were clearly written by someone who spends way too much time on Twitter. That's like every white person is evil and they like eat like kill black people for fun, and there's not a likable one. They all suck, and it's like, okay, man, I get it. Like, yeah, racism's bad, but like this is not like how the world works. Racism is a bit more complicated than like being maniacally evil or having every white person be maniacally evil. It's a bit like Detroit Become Human, where like everyone who's not a robot is like unbelievably racist towards robots for like no explicit reason. But in this movie, it feels like it's not like making a claim about like white people as a whole. They're making a claim about specific individuals whose like there is a correlation between these individuals and their race, i.e. them being white. But like it's not lazy, I guess. That's to sum up that idea. Yeah, Monk's rival character, just looking at my notes, Monk's rival character is very interesting because she's kind of comes across when she's first introduced as this like I'm just here for the money, and I published this book and it's making a lot of money. I didn't think about writing it. I just slapped book words on the page, and now I'm rich. But later she gets selected, and he himself also gets selected to basically be judges on a panel that's like book award, some book award ceremony. And as Monk and like Monk discovers, as like the way she talks about books, like, you know, when she's offering her perspective or feelings, you like just like he ends up agreeing with a lot what she says, and we see how like surprised and caught off guard he was. And I thought that was very interesting. I'm a sucker for characters that are portrayed to be like very stereotypically or like very one note, but then as the movie goes like or the story goes on, we discover that they're like a lot more complicated than like we as the audience initially gave them credit for. I'm writing a book right now, and that's literally every character. Every character in my book is like introduced as super one note, but then over the course of the story we're like, oh, they're actually kind of fucked up in a tragic way. Ooh. Anyway, I guess that's it for characters. We could talk about plot a bit more, but I already kind of talked about plot, so I don't know if I have too much more to say. Let's check the notes. Spoilers. I probably should have put a spoiler warning at the beginning. I'm sorry. I would recommend this movie. It's not the type of movie I would watch again, but like, I'm glad to have watched it. I think I said in my Letterboxd review that like I think this was the director's directorial debut, and I think I said in my Letterboxd review that like this director and this movie very much comes across as like, give him like 2 or 3 more films and like you'll have like a masterpiece. Like I wouldn't be surprised that his third or his second or third film would be like a 10 out of 10 in my book. Like this is a very good first attempt for like a directorial debut. But the ending, not a huge fan of it. It's pretty anticlimactic, and I know that was the point, but it's still disappointing. Basically, Fuck, the book he wrote, wins the book award that, you know, he's been judging for, which I don't know if that would get him like in trouble for like, oh, you are judging a book that you wrote, but like, you know, he used a pseudonym, so no one really knows it was him. But at the award ceremony, when they're like, and the winner is Fuck, Monk walks up on stage and everyone's confused, and we're like, oh my god, he's finally going to tell the world, and he's going to tell how he totally duped everyone, because for the whole movie everyone's just been praising fuck. They've been saying all this like beautiful thing. It's like, oh, it was the greatest book I've ever read. It made me cry. It was so deep. It was so nuanced. And he's going to declare to the whole world, every idiot who like took it seriously, that the whole thing was a massive joke making fun of people, of you, those people who read this book. And then it just cuts away to Monk being in like talking to like the director character, because they were doing a movie adaptation of fuck before it was even published, which yeah, that is a thing. Both Hollywood and the publishing industry do now, that they sell off the movie and TV show rights before it's even out yet, which I fucking hate, because it's just like, you're doing this for no reason but to make money, which is, to be fair, the most common reason for why they do things anyway. But he's just like, yeah, I didn't know how to finish this ending. It was pretty anticlimactic in real life. I didn't really like do that. And then they like go through a few different endings of like what he could have done. And then like he's like, well, whatever. Bye now. And he leaves. I really wish, like, I know the point was like anticlimax. Like, anticlimax is normally thrown around as a criticism, but like originally it was a specific like ace, and it still is to this day. It's a specific concept that's implemented with intent to basically, well, there's a lot of reasons why a writer might implement anticlimax, but most commonly it's to represent how mundane something people kind of prop up, commonly prop up is. Basically, like, it's used to show something that like maybe we as the audience or maybe the characters think is like grand or special. And anticlimax like is used to show that actually it's pretty mundane. So like this is a very common trope. It's not super common, but it's pretty common, and I do like it whenever it shows up. Is that in like a fantasy story where like we hear about like the big bad, and he's just like an evil guy, and he's like, I'm evil, I'm the Dark Lord, I'm gonna kill everyone. And then at like the end of the story, when he gets killed, he just dies and just kind of falls over, and it's like very anticlimactic. I think that's how the Harry Potter book ends. The Harry Potter book, like the book series ends. It ends with just like Voldemort just getting hit by like a deflected like killing curse spell, and he just falls over dead. And like that was very specific. Like that anticlimactic like climax was specific because it was done to showcase that like, yo, this guy was not the Dark Lord of like the, you know, the devil and human incarnation, like the devil personified. Like he was literally just a guy, and he died just like any other guy would. I say all this because like I think for this movie the anticlimax was intentional. So when I say anticlimax, I'm not criticizing it for being anticlimax, because like as in like anticlimax is bad. I'm criticizing because I don't think it should have been anticlimax. Like I think that was the wrong way to go. I think it would have been both a better movie and a more enjoyable experience and a more satisfying experience too, for him to just, declare proudly to the world, you all are a bunch of idiots who I duped. And though this is probably going to destroy my reputation, it was worth it. It could have been good. That's my main, those are my main issues with the plot. I've discussed about the family stuff and the ending. Anything else? Miscellaneous. I have a little section here on my notes called miscellaneous. I don't remember the music, though for some reason this movie snagged an original score nomination, which is weird because I don't remember the music even a little bit. The editing and cinematography was pretty all right. They tell some pretty fun jokes, or not like clever jokes. They tell some pretty clever jokes with the cinematography. Which like I always love it when I love it when movies use cinematography, like they actually use them and they don't just like point the camera at a character, but like they actually like think about like how the camera should like be angled, or like what the characters should do in relation to it. Like they actually take the time to think about it. But they do tell. I love it particularly when movies do use cinematography to tell jokes, and they very much did so for this movie at several scenes. So that was nice. I don't have too much more to say about this movie. It was pretty good, 7 out of 10. Cut the family stuff, and or reduce it, or tie it in more succinctly, and make the ending more satisfying. And you got a potential 9 out of 10 on your hands. This whole movie kind of reminded me, like the plot or the concept of this movie kind of reminded me of this another scam in the book world back in the 50s, like a real life scam. Well, not a scam so much as it was like a like societal prank. I don't know what you would classify it as. A hoax, but like it was. It's called the I Libertine fiasco. I think Austin McConnell, I think that's the YouTuber's name. He has a good video about it. It's basically about how this radio talk show host, like late night host that like does it at 3 a.m. Like he makes up a fake book because he's tired of people like being super snobbish about like books they haven't even read and being like, oh, I heard that musical was quite subpar, and they haven't even seen the musical. It's like, oh, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Anyway, but like he and his friends basically make up a fake book, and they're like, with his audience, they're like, you go in tomorrow and like go to these bookstores and ask if you have these books in stock. And eventually, if enough of us do that, like it's gonna start to spread from there. Essentially, like word of this book that has like super high demand is gonna spread. And I just look it up. It's a very funny story, and it reminded me of this movie, of people gushing about a book that was literally created to make fun of people, make fun of the people who gush about it. All right, that's all I have to say. This is a much longer review than I thought it would be. All right, bye.